Mason Buckles here, excited to spend some time with Stacy Eakman of Alair Kirkland. Stacy, thank you so much for making some time today, man. I tell you, I've been following you online for a while. I was fortunate to be introduced through a mutual connection here, and really just appreciate you taking some time to share with us more about what's going on in the custom home building space.
Of course, thank you for having me. It's exciting. I follow you as well, and our mutual connection is obviously we stay connected that way, and so I'm excited to learn more about you as well.
Yeah, very cool. Well, maybe you can do us a favor and just kind of share your journey going from when you started your business and kind of the origins there, and how that's led you to the transition to partnering with Alair over the last few years, and just the growth that you've experienced over the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's a where do you start type of question, right? But,
of course.
I grew up in Eastern Washington, in Yakima, and Dad was a builder, remodel company my whole life, and I watched him work really hard and be a really honest guy and do a really good job, and he builds beautiful stuff. And so eventually I started working with him after college, and I realized I didn't want to do construction.
Okay.
I really didn't. Dad was intent on staying small so he could just be really high touch with his clients, which worked for him. But I wanted to have more of a company, not just a job, right? Yeah. And so I moved over here to the West Side to kind of get my life straightened out. Yeah. I was going through a tough time, and get my life straightened out, and also to do something other than that. Yeah. And next thing you know, I kind of had to get a business license through a weird situation, and now we're here. And really, really glad. It was like a path that was kind of chosen for me, right? Yeah. I tried my best to get away from it, and it just ends up now it's everything, right? So
well, yeah, you were telling me that part of your journey was kind of doing some side jobs and everything else, and then you realized, hey, like, let me get my ducks in a row, get a license in place. And then talk to me a little about, like, you mentioned you'd hired a couple people that ended up being some really great people on your team, and next thing you know, it feels like there's a business in place, and it grew from there.
Yeah, I realized that, I hired one and then hired another, and I realized I could have two projects going at once, which was like mind-blowing to me at the time. It's just funny thinking back at it now. Now it's 12 projects all the time, but at the time, like, I could be selling a project and have a couple of projects going, and of course I thought I was like making money and doing great. I was just learning how to do it, and there's a cost to that, right? Of course. I eventually realized I wasn't, but I learned a lot, and I realized that who I have around me is really what's kind of most important. Yeah. I can be the face, and I can be a go-getter, and I can go sell jobs and gain people's trust. I learned that from my dad. Mm-hmm. But actually producing the work in a timely manner, in an organized manner, on budget and on time, and all those things that are so important. Of course. And still being somebody that the client respects, and we respect them, and they're happy at the end. Like, that takes an organization to do that, time, right? And so I started realizing that I really needed to hire some really good people. And one thing I've never been afraid of is just like going for it. Yeah. Every time I've made a big hire, typically, like, I don't have any idea how we're going to afford it. We're not, there's not a spot for them. There's not hours to bill for them. But, when I knew it was right, and I'd just make the move. And I just consistently, even today, keep hiring people that know more about a specific part of the business than I do. And
just surround yourself with experts. Yeah, that's incredible. And then how long did you have Eakman before you joined Alair?
It was 10 years. Okay. It was 10 years.
Yeah.
I joined 1 month after our 10-year party. We had a 10-year party for Eakman Construction at our new office in Kirkland. Everybody came out. Nobody knew that I was going to do this. I had been in this transition talk for 2 years. Okay. We went back, and they really wanted us to be the pilot office. Yeah. We've got a good presence. It's a good spot to start with. For sure. Who we were. Our processes aligned pretty well, so the transition wouldn't be
that was my
difficult.
question when you're identifying like a suitor for that.
Yeah, it's tough. There's a certain way that Alair that we do it, and it's almost identical to the way Eakman has always done it, accidentally. But still, it took 2 years. Eakman was my baby. Yeah. I worked, thousands of hours and thousands of days, and just pain, the ups and downs, and it was finally working. Yeah. It took 6, 8, 10 years for things to like really be working, and the processes that, again, I don't have a business degree. Every year it's the biggest company I've ever ran, because all we do is grow. Yeah. and I'm trying to create processes, and you know, there was good times and there was bad.
Of course.
But at the time to make that decision, I mean, things were working, and I had the right team in place. So it was probably the hardest decision of my life. But, you know, we had that party, and I hadn't made the final decision yet, but I left there, and I had somebody working with me who at the time would help book my travel and things like that, because I was doing quite a few events. And I told her, I said, hey, look, book me a trip to, I started in South Carolina, then we went to, I said, I'm not coming back. I'm going to meet other Alair offices. I'm not coming back till I have a decision. Because the hardest part for me was not being able to decide. I stayed up all night.
Interesting.
If I'm good at anything, I'm good at making decisions. Not always good decisions, but I make them, and I buy into it, and I'll change
forward.
directions quickly, but I make it because I just think that, you know, if I'm gambling and I'm going to win 80% of the hands, I'm saying deal faster, right? And how fast can you deal? And so that's the way I feel about decisions, is if I'm 80% of the time right, give me more decisions to make, and let's go. And the 20% that we mess up, like, you'll make 10 decisions that 8 of them will be right.
You live with the 2 and
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was killing me.
Yeah.
And so I went and saw some guys that were similar size offices as me, and built similar
Different
products as me. And just asked them. And one of the guys in South Carolina was really the decider for me. He built, like, he's the guy in Charleston, and his company was what I thought, once I get to that style where I'm one of 2 in town that all the high-end custom architects go to, like, the business runs itself, like, it's put together at that point. And, you know, he was quite a bit older than me, and I sat down with him and I said, what are you doing? Why did you do this? You know, like, what made you do it? And what he laid out exactly the same problems I have, just in a different scale and a different deal. Like, nothing was different.
Different purview around it, but
he still had no exit. He still had no his project managers could only become project managers, and so growth stops, and then they get bored and they go to another company, and there's all the same problems. And so I just asked him, like, are you glad you did it? And he said, oh, it's the best thing I ever did. Wow. And so that was my first stop, and then my last stop again on that trip. And once he told me that, I flew back, and I flew to Naples and met with Shane, the guy that I was working with about signing up, and I said, all right, let's do it. And then within a month from then, contract was signed, and we were there.
Incredible. Yeah. And then speak to, I mean, if you don't mind, like, your growth since joining Alair. It seems like it's really kind of taken you guys to that next level.
I think growth as a company, you know, in construction, we typically, in most businesses, we talk growth is revenue growth. Right. We haven't had that. We contracted a little bit.
Interesting, yeah.
The transition is anybody thinking about signing up for Alair, it's a beautiful thing. It's awesome. None of us are going to lie to you that the transition is difficult.
Of course.
And for us, you know, I feel like we're as good as anybody at it because of the structure we had set up. The business was set up like a business, right? Where I was doing business development, and the rest of it was kind of ran by departments. So we were able to get through transition as good as anybody, but it's hard on everybody, right? You're running 2 systems, 2 softwares, because you got to finish all your Eakman projects. In Eakman, any new projects are starting in Alair.
That makes sense.
It's all new process and all new software.
Yeah, I've gone through M&A a couple times. I know the challenge.
It's a tough deal.
Yeah.
And so my focus was a lot on that, and I bring in most of the sales. So we contracted a little bit, you know, 5%.
Right, you're getting the kinks ironed out here before you can really get out there and go effectively sell again.
Yeah, but, you know, we're back now. Sales 2025 is going to be awesome. 2023 was great. This year is just going to be, you know, our sales cycle's a year. Right. So you meet with somebody a year ago and you start it today.
That makes sense.
So a year ago right now I just had my launch party in March, and it was craziness for a few months. So we just have this little lull coming up. It's nothing major, but growth as a company in systems and processes and organization and morale and just company culture is it's crazy how much it has helped.
What impact it's made.
It's made a huge impact. Our project managers have, you know, 400 other project managers they can reach out to around the country and
collaborate and grow with.
And they just see it. We're able to just see that there's more to it than, hey, I work for this guy who builds houses. You know, so we work for this company. Right?
That's incredible. Really that culture behind it now. That's, I mean, it's so interesting to me. Like, you see the opposite of that sometimes when you go through that M&A process and people join a big company and they regret it, right? And they're like, oh man, like now we're so big, but to see the upside of it and to be able to capture that so quickly is incredible. Yeah, and kudos to you as the business owner and the leader there to make the tough choice and lead them to a better place.
Yeah, I was afraid we were going to have a bunch of turnover once we announced. I was afraid people were, but nobody left, and which is a testament to Darren, my VP. He's the people love working for him.
Great.
And I think that although Alair is big, we're still just one office.
Right.
We're still the same team. I own that office 100%. So we did a good job of relaying that to the team. That nothing really has changed here, except you're going to start wearing black instead of red.
Okay.
And we're going to use this software instead of that.
So we have the truck in black instead of red now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everybody's getting a new truck or a new wrap on their truck. Everybody's excited about that.
I'm sure.
It's been really good. And the community, there was also that little lull of confusion, right? Of like, what happened? Did Stacy go bankrupt? Like,
right.
What
misconceptions?
Happened there, right? You go to the old website and it kicks you to the new one, and like, hold on a minute, right? So, but the community, man, things have really gotten back to where it was,
nice.
And people are excited about it.
Very
they
cool.
want to hear about it.
Yeah,
it's good.
That's awesome, man. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about just what you're seeing from a market standpoint, like in that custom. And I mean, you're obviously working the high end of this, but like from your point of view, like how have you seen things change, even coming through the pandemic and into this post-pandemic world where it feels like everybody's kind of in flux about what they want to do from a real estate perspective, and the high-end customer is always going to have their high-end needs, but you've seen that over the last decade plus. What are the trends that you're seeing in 2024 just from like a customer perspective of what they want and need for their home?
Well, I think that everybody, even the high-end people, right, the luxury people, everybody's being a little more careful, right, and longer to decide, and making sure that they're not being unreasonable with their money. Obviously, interest rates and just unknowns and elections and all that stuff, right? But what always has always been and will always be is people want a really nice living space. Yeah. They want indoor outdoor space. Yeah. I think that our area is, I don't know, the demographic here believes in being green and efficiencies and sustainability and all of that, but our climate doesn't really require it, right? Like it doesn't get really cold and it doesn't get really hot. So your return on doing a green built home or a net zero home, it takes a long, in Minnesota, it matters, right? Because you don't have to heat it as much. Right? Here, it's just like it doesn't matter that much, except
that's
for
interesting,
it's really good.
I mean, you hear that a lot about people wanting to have that really environmentally conscious build, but to see that return for the cost,
it takes a long time here because it's just so moderate, in the grand scheme of how it is, right, in the world. But with the codes changing recently, we're getting more and more and more required to almost, I believe that in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, like net zero is going to be code.
Okay.
It'll probably start in Oregon. It'll be here next, right?
Okay.
California will be either before us, right ahead of us, but we're all going to, net zero is going to be required. And people are starting to really get on board more and more with it. One, because builders are, we're more familiar with it, so costs are becoming more reasonable.
Okay.
For a while, like to build a net zero house, it was like, well, none of us have done that before.
Well, and maybe to back up just for a sec, maybe you can help for those that aren't familiar with net zero and what that means. Maybe unpack that for a sec for us.
Well, it means that your house,
like the emissions or whatever, right?
Yeah, the energy drawn,
Yeah.
it produces the energy. You don't actually take anything off the grid,
Okay.
right? So solar, it plays a big part in that.
Right.
And really, it's how the house is insulated, how the house functions, and the air exchanges and all of that.
Interesting.
I'm not one of the ones trained in my company, but there's a organization called FIAS.
Okay.
And if you're a FIAS certified net zero house, it's kind of like a stamp of honor. They send inspectors, got to be there for it and see it all. But really, like, it is how tight your house is.
Interesting.
You go in a house, that's 30 years old, and you stand next to a window and you
Yeah,
can
you
feel,
get a draft.
right?
Yeah.
Now that doesn't happen. We our standards are 1.5 air exchanges per hour. So all the air in the house
Yeah.
leaves and new comes in 1.5 times an hour, which is really, really tight.
Wow.
Net zeros or more efficient than that. A lot of people are going sub ones. We do that as well, but that takes a certain level of intelligence and know-how and subcontractor and everybody. It all goes in architect, everything, right? Of how that's all going to go together, and then how the house can breathe. Because if the house can't breathe, then you got another problem. Right. Things get stale or things get moist, or humidity becomes a problem. So then you've got to do HRVs or ERVs to actually move air around.
Okay.
So there's a lot that goes.
It sounds really complex for environmental goal. Talk to me a little bit about like what are you seeing on the trends? I know home automation's been a big one for years now. Like what are some of the newer trends around that you guys are seeing in your builds?
To be honest with you, Lutron and all of those, we subcontract an AV guy to do that.
Great.
But most of our builds, even our really high-end builds, aren't doing it, which I agree with you. It seems surprising because everybody talks about it on YouTube, and you go, you see it all over the place where people
like it's
are
the
pushing
shiny
buttons.
object piece of it,
Yeah, it's the tech cool thing.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons that people aren't doing it as much here is just the cost of construction in general in our area is pretty high.
Yep.
And it's an easy thing to rough in now and put in later.
That makes
it's
sense.
An easy thing to value engineer out.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we've got 2 projects going right now that have some, but it's not huge. They can control it from anywhere in the world from their phone,
right?
Being lights and heat and humidity and all of that stuff. But it's still pretty basic compared to some of my builder friends in Arizona and around the country. I mean, they're doing like really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Doors that are open and push a button and all that.
That's cool,
super high end stuff. But here, we're just not seeing it on our builds.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to the next question, talking about just like our market and what you've seen on trend for cost to build. I know the pandemic created such constraints and pain within the supply chains, and like, are you seeing that ease at all as we've started to work our way out of this, or what are some of the challenges that you as a home builder and your clients are experiencing?
I think that everybody's hoping that it eases. In the worst of times, even in 2008, cost of construction went up. It always goes up. Yeah. For a little while, guys were hunting for work and doing it really cheap, but those guys went out of business, and so then you got a supply and demand problem again, and so the guys still in business are charging more. So what we've seen, I wish I had the video. I'm sure I have it somewhere, but I don't remember. It was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I did a cost of construction, cost per square foot video, and the same question, like, where's it going? What's happening? And I said, we're 3 years behind San Francisco. So right now, San Francisco is at $600-700 a foot. We're at $400, but 3 years from now, we're going to be $600-700 a foot, and they're going to be $1,000. And I mean, it's spot on.
Yeah.
You can still build a nice house for $700 a foot. Mm-hmm. You have to be. It's so many factors, right? I mean, the actual design, the what's the site like, and what's your finishes, and all of it, siding, windows, every little thing. You get $10,000 to death, but that
$10,000 to death.
that $700 a foot. That's a house that I think is the right house to build.
Okay.
You get really nice everything, but nothing extravagant, right? But you also nothing on. You don't have to go cheap in the kids' bathroom, right?
Makes sense.
Can do it nice everywhere.
Very good.
You can still build a house for less than that, but you just really have to work through that with a builder and an architect early to just guide that project. You got to pick the right lot. You got to pick the right overall design, the right size, all that. It can't be too small because you get no scale. It can't be too big because it just starts to get expensive, right? So. I usually don't. I try not to talk about cost per square foot because it just is. It's impossible. What you need to do is you get an idea of kind of what you want and sit down, figure out how much you're willing to spend. Right. Hire a builder for pre-construction or planning services. Yep. Hire an architect, and as a team, come together. Go towards that number, which is kind of where I think the market is lacking is true planning services. Yeah. That's provided actually as a service, kind of a standalone service.
That makes sense.
Which we require it with our builds. just because we see that, expectations are everything.
Well, that's what we've seen. I mean, my experience on the lending side feels like there's kind of two camps from a consumer perspective. There's the camp that's like the new buyer. It's like, oh, it's going to be cheaper for me to go, buy dirt and build something. And you're like, no. And it's a pretty, quick conversation around capital and how you can deploy it. Or then you get into that buyer that's potentially looking at a project like yours. And oftentimes, if they're introduced to us after the fact, and they don't know, like what they're eligible for from a loan perspective or what it's going to take from a capital standpoint, that can be a really big hurdle to overcome. Or they start with us and they think they can get it done for X, and then they come meet with you and then it becomes Y. What are you seeing, like a new client, introduced to you that you're starting that discussion with? And it sounds like most of yours comes through a pipeline of architects that you work with and trust. Like, what are you seeing as some of the common, I wouldn't even say objections, but just pieces of knowledge they don't yet have that you educate them on early to make sure that it's a successful project?
By and large, how long just it takes to just from like, hey, we're talking today, to just like getting a permit and starting. The design, to design a house that you love and it's your dream home, that takes some time before you can even go in for permit.
Right.
It takes a lot of pricing exercises in the middle there so that we can make sure that we're on budget.
Yeah.
There's some value engineering that inevitably has to happen because it's more than you wanted to spend. So they're surprised about that. And people are always surprised at just the overall cost. Yeah. Even if they have a big huge budget, they're like, man, things are expensive. Wow, plumbing's expensive. And I agree with you. I wish we could still build them for I'd be really busy if we could build a house for $300 a foot like we could, right? But you just can't do it. So educating them really early on that, and reminding them that maybe they make really good money, and maybe they have a bunch of stocks, and maybe they've got properties all over the place. But hey, if you're going to borrow money to do this, like, let's go find out what your budget is now, before we're in a pickle, right? And a lot of times, people just think like, well, I can borrow this, I can do that. Well, a construction loan is completely different than a mortgage, and and with the interest rates where they are, like, you can borrow a lot less than you could 2 years ago. So
well, even what you're comfortable with, right? Even if you're qualified for what you want, maybe you're not comfortable with it any longer. I think we've seen that, time and time again over the last couple of years, which has been challenging because, you're building somebody's dream home. For lack of a better term, they're designing it, they're going to love it, that's their dream vision of what they want to live in, and we got to marry that somehow on the financing side for, the majority of people that are doing it. So.
And the other mistake I see people make a lot is they really think that waiting until further down the road to get 3 or 4 bids or 3 or 4 estimates on your project. They've got a guy telling them they can do it for $3 million, somebody's saying 6, and somebody's saying 5. They pick the guy at 5 because that's what the internet says. Pick the one in the middle. And it's a broken way to go about it. The only way really to go about it is to pick your team based on who you want to work with. Because at the end of the project, it's going to be the same. If you were talking to 3 reputable builders that are transparent with their numbers and show you all their costs and all of that, it's going to end up being
in the same ballpark.
It's 1 or 2%. So what's most important to you? Is it most important to you to think you're getting it for really cheap and it cost you a lot, or to know it's going to cost you a lot and it costs you a lot and know what you're getting into, right? But when you're trying to value engineer in the middle of the project because you're going over budget, it's impossible. So we lose a lot of projects because we're really honest on the front end. Well, our very first estimate is almost always more than the other 2. And we're able to show you why. And at that point, there's just not enough information, right? All the pictures they're sending the architect have marble floor to ceiling in the bathroom. But the architect hasn't relayed that to us, so we might not have that in there. But we assume, hey, this level of house, this was probably going to want marble floor to ceiling. Well,
can make an educated decision around it.
The other contractor who is more worried about just like getting the job and things like that, which we want every project as well. But they're going to say, well, it's not specified, so we're going to say that they're getting.
It's going to be this grade versus that grade.
It's only going there, right? So. It really changes costs. So my mission from the beginning at our company has been to change the way people feel about residential construction companies. And, what that means is, like, people are terrified when they sit down at your conference table. They don't know who to hire, why to hire. They've got a list of questions off the internet that they're asking. And some of them are like, do you have insurance? And you're like, look around, like, obvious, but they don't know. And, I learned that watching my dad, who is honest beyond honest,
Yeah, to a fault.
and never would charge more than, never, right? And people didn't trust him, right?
Yeah.
Because as an
Inherently, they just
industry,
don't. Yeah.
we've earned it,
Yeah.
right? We take deposits and run off. We charge as much as we can possibly charge because it's busy and all the things. It takes twice as long and costs twice as much, right? Like that's the stigma we've got, and we've earned it.
Yeah.
So how do we like on a big scale? How do we change the way people feel about that? Need some like standardized processes.
Yeah.
I say it all the time. Like when you go to Costco and throw the toilet paper on the rack or on your cart, you don't look at the price. You don't check Walmart to see if it's any cheaper.
Yeah.
You just know that it's a value because it's Costco, because there's this brand behind it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little more than it was a month ago when you went to get it, but you don't wonder why. You know why. Well, the cost of paper went up or whatever it is.
Right,
you throw it on
you
and then
just
you
trust it.
just pay it.
Yep.
And somehow, in Alair, that's why one of the big reasons is because everybody in in North America who's in Alair does it the exact same way.
Yeah.
And there's no consistency. It's the only industry left. Go buy a Mercedes anywhere, and it's the same. You test drive. You don't get to go through the contract and I'm Xing that out and I'm changing that. And my attorney's going to review it. No, you just sign it because you know that this is Mercedes Benz, right? Like it's legal, you know. And so we somehow have to get to where people choose a builder because they want to work with that builder, because they got a reputation of being trustworthy. And then it's a whole bunch easier because you hire the builder, the architect, you've got your lender, you got your interior designer, you got your landscape architect. We are a team. Everybody, all of us work directly for you, the client.
Right.
So we all have a
working
duty
together, so they're not having to quarterback it.
We are we call it, it's the design team, it's the owner, and it's the builder, and it's the three-legged stool.
Okay.
The thing doesn't stand up without all three of them, right? So it's really important. And people, there's just a lack of trust in our industry altogether that has caused it to be worse for the end client. And people don't understand it. It's that they look at you like you're crazy when you say you should be picking a builder right now. And they're like, well, we haven't even got plans drawn.
Well, that's the thing I think that I've seen in my career, just on the lending side, is people just don't know what they're going into there or what to expect. And like to your point, leveraging the internet and trying to get feedback. And I love like standardized practices. It's a big part of our business and how I operate my team. And I think one of the things that I always talk about is expectation management. It sounds like you guys do an amazing job of that as well, which, inevitably that's going to certainly eliminate some clients right away, but also make sure that you're delivering that experience that you strive for the clients that choose you. So,
yep, exactly.
Talk to me about what are some of what's a favorite project of yours that you've done, either recently or in the past, or what's on the horizon? What's coming up that you're really excited about?
Well, there's a couple of sides to that. There's personally, we just finished. I had, I mentioned earlier that when I moved over here, I was kind of going through a rough time in my life. I actually came over here and went to treatment at a treatment center in Kirkland, and we just donated and completed a remodel of their lobby. I remember when I walked in there with my parents, and it's scary, and you don't want to be there. All you want to do is run out of there, and I just felt compelled to make this a welcoming space so that at least this space feels
That's
okay,
amazing.
And so we redid that, and they ended up hiring our subcontractors directly to redo a bunch more of the space outside of that. So they got that I'm proud of that.
For sure.
We were able to give back. That was 15 years ago now, but I remember it was yesterday when I checked in there, So that was, and we just did that, and so standing out in front of there, taking a picture with my mom, who I'm sure when she dropped me off there was like, hope this guy makes it
terrified,
out, what's happening here. It was a proud moment. But on a cool project, like what we're doing, we're finishing two amazing projects, the two nicest projects that we've built. One here in Anatai in Bellevue, and one up in Innisarden in Shoreline. Okay. And they're both extremely cool, great architects, and the clients, both amazing clients who know what they want, and they're understanding, and it's going great. The one here in Anatai is such a gorgeous house. I can't wait to get photos of it and do a whole bunch of marketing around that, just because I believe it's really going to elevate us to another level. The one up in Innisarden is unique. The architect is actually they're from Bogota, Colombia.
Okay.
They typically do really really modern stuff, but there's just a little twist on it, right? It's just a little kind of foreign twist.
Okay.
Here we kind of gotten in that Northwest modern. If it's
Right.
got a flat roof, we call it modern, but it's not really modern, you know. They do like truly modern stuff, and it's going to be really neat. It's very unique, and I'm excited about that one as well.
Yeah, I guess that's a kind of off-topic question here, or off script, but like, what's your favorite type of home? You know, you've seen so many, and you've built so many, and obviously you're exposed to, you know, the cutting edge, if you will, of what you're seeing in that custom space. Like, what are you really into personally right now?
I really like modern,
Yeah.
with big eyebrows, big overhangs,
Yeah.
big outdoor spaces. I like stone or concrete. I like minimal. I like things to be minimal. And the reason I like them to be minimal is because it's really hard to do well, right? It's simple, not easy, right? Everybody says, "Oh, my house is really simple." Oh, that's really hard, you know. Like we can't cover it up with trim, right? It's simple, not easy. So we're proud of those when we walk away, because there's nothing that you can cover up.
You can't hide it. Yeah.
So you can look over in that corner and like all the way to the floor, the drywall's perfect, you know. And as builders, as people that are passionate about that stuff, we like to see that. So that's what I like. I also like building, or when I was in the field, like as a carpenter, I really liked doing like traditional craftsman stuff, where you could do really cool millwork and crown molding everywhere and stuff like that. So I like both sides of it, and we do it all. We got teams that kind of
Specialize in different sides
in things. Yeah. So, but if I was building a house for myself, it would be really minimal, a lot of concrete, things like that.
Very cool. Well, what else is on the horizon? I think the thing that's been really interesting as we've come out of the pandemic and seen interest rates rise is, new home sales, right? And obviously there's a vast difference between what you do and what a plat builder is doing out there from a new home sale perspective. But what are you seeing, like, if you're starting to forecast for Alair Homes Kirkland over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, are you seeing great expansion in your space? Are you seeing more customization and like specialization into these different types of homes? Like, what are you really focused in on when you think about your client base and your business?
I mean, we believe that there's always enough work to grow if you're doing a good job. So I believe that Alair Homes Kirkland is going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to expand. Also, a new office opened down in Tacoma, but we're going to start seeing more Alairs in our region. So that's good for everything, more consistency and all of that. So Alair in general in our region is going to grow. I think our market, like as an industry, we're going to continue to go. It's going to be challenging times. Not necessarily for the businesses. The good businesses will be fine, but for the clients, the costs, everybody's hoping that they go down. They're just not gonna. I think the average construction worker in the trades right now is 56 years old, and every 100 that retire, only 7 come in. So that's like 93% extinction rate over the next 9 years. So what does that do to costs, right? It goes up. So what I'm really hoping is, everybody's afraid of AI and what AI is going to do. Well, I'm excited about maybe AI is going to take away some jobs in the tech world. And maybe kids will start coming back to wanting to use their hands and work in the trades, and it might stabilize things a little bit, because the best job out there for somebody is right now is something where you build stuff. I mean, the guys that work for us and our subcontractors, they make really good money and they have really good benefits and all of that, and we're proud of that. But we do need more of them if we're going to be able to, because we also can't, me and the plat builders, like, we can't keep up with the housing demand. I mean, as you know, there's the cost of housing is through the roof. Interest rates are through the roof. Why is that? Well, it's because there's no houses to buy. And then why is that? Because everybody stopped building them in 2008, really. But then we stopped again in 2020. And there's a problem. And now land's so expensive that it's hard for people to jump into that market, and the cost of construction. So you've just got to spend so much or you've got to believe you're going to get so much for the house. So as a whole, I just think it's really important that, we're all reminding high school kids and college kids and anybody who doesn't necessarily know for sure what they want to do.
Right.
That, hey, there's really good opportunity over here, and it's not a bad thing. Went through a time there where it was like, a plumber, an electrician, and a contractor were like, and that's more about like what people think about construction companies, right? When you're a 9-year-old kid and your parents did a remodel on their house and all they're doing is talking about how bad the experience is with, you really want to be a contractor? No, you're like, I don't want to be one of those guys, right? So changing all of that, it'll just I really think it can change the market if we do
that's
it.
Incredible.
We just need more people who want to do it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, obviously more companies that are focused on running the way you are and really creating that experience that can be repeatable and referable and really start to change the perception.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Well, Stacy, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you for sharing. I learned a lot. Grateful and excited to connect with you again soon.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Yep.